you're live.
All right.
And we got one person watching already. Make sure I did that right. So we're here with Frank Grove, Oklahomans for Health, now Oklahomans for Cannabis,
Uh-huh. And the
and
Oklahoma Cannabis League.
the Oklahoma Cannabis League. Instrumental on question 788 in getting it in front of the voters. And we're here to talk about that little adventure and where we're going.
All right. Yeah.
Uh, so we'll start with how did you get involved? I mean, you were politically involved before you got into the medical marijuana thing, right?
Yeah. So, we've done a lot of things over the years, various Oklahoma activists across the state. And a lot of us met during the Occupy movement back
Right.
in 2011. And that was kind of the group that organized the rally in early 2014 that kind of kicked everything off as far as the modern movement is concerned.
Right.
So that's where things kind of came from and just built from there.
Where did the idea of getting the petitions going start? Where was it after Occupy, during Occupy, or just something that slowly
Well, that started at the
evolved?
rally, basically.
Okay.
That's where people started calling for initiative petitions.
Right.
And that's when we kind of started doing research. So, Oklahoma City, that group kind of looked into doing a decrim petition municipally. And we did the same thing here in Tulsa. We contacted Blake Ewing, and he worked with the city attorney. We got info back. Basically, municipal petitions were a waste of time. That's
Yeah,
what we
yeah.
figured out. So, and OKC tried for one, and they didn't succeed. They withdrew. So we kind of realized it had to be a statewide initiative petition to pull this off at that point.
So when you guys started, I mean, how does one begin? You just where are the first steps if one wants to do this?
Well, first of all, if you wanted to do an initiative petition for anything, say instituting a ranked vote across the state,
Hmm.
you have to get the text of the law put together. And that's kind of the complicated part of the process
Right.
because you need a good law. And then once you have the text of the law, you basically fill out some forms with the Secretary of State and they stamp it and you're good to go.
So how'd you go about getting the law together, the rhetoric of it?
That was a long process. We started in 2014 when a lawyer for Oklahomans for Health basically enacted the first draft of the language, and then the entire group kind of worked and did our thing and made a few changes here or there, but it was really just kind of what the lawyer gave the group, and we ran with that in 2014 as a statewide constitutional amendment, which requires 15% of the previous gubernatorial vote, which was a lot of signatures, I think about like 125, 150,000. It was
Right.
a large amount. So we instead after that failed, obviously in 2014 was a very low voter turnout,
Right.
which meant that the state statute requirement dipped down to around 62,000 signatures.
So that worked in your favor, the
Yeah,
low voter
I'm
turnout.
really glad no one voted in 2014. Great job, guys. So
Yeah.
that was a big part of this. But obviously we got to vote now. But the language for 788, the final language, came from that 2014 petition, but there's a lot of flaws. It had a qualifying conditions list. It had a bunch of other
Yeah.
issues that we saw. There's no privacy protections. The card was, really, they didn't specify what kind of data the Department of Health could keep. So we gutted that and rewrote it, and there was a process. There was 4 meetings across the state, and 2016, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Norman, and Stillwater. And we had a lot of people come out and make a lot of changes. Attorney named Mike Oakley, he made a lot of changes with kind of help us out with, leaving out part of the DUI aspects. So that was a big discussion, even then.
Right.
There's a guy named Rick Duncan out there, and man, he had a bunch of proposals. He really helped a lot, kind of deliberate and iron out that language. The first meeting we had, Connie Johnson showed up, Joe Dorman, and he expressed kind of approval or whatever of us going for a state statute.
Yeah.
So kind of the primary difference in 2016 was we decided, well, hey, we don't need a constitutional amendment. Let's do a state statute. It's not as well protected, But that turned out to be an argument in its favor ultimately during the campaign.
Right.
So, I mean, 788 was written by the people of Oklahoma. Lots of people came to those meetings and had a big part of the final language. So,
And so when you how many signatures did you end up getting on the 2014 campaign?
we got around 75,000 signatures.
Yeah, that was the part when I met you when you were getting ready for the second time was that you had pretty much gained as many people as you had that many signatures the first round that you would need this round for the second draft or the
Right.
second
Second
attempt,
try, yeah.
and but that you were more organized and you had more money behind
Well,
you.
we actually had probably less money. We had no corporate sponsorship. I mean, our biggest donation in 2016 was a retired postman who dropped like $5,000 on us.
Wow.
So what we did have though was a broader organization. We had an idea of what worked, what didn't. We tried out
You had
strategies.
experience.
Yeah, in the 2014 we started going door to door, and
Slam.
terrible idea. And then I think one of the local anarchists saw one of these phone booths sitting up, where they're giving out free phones back in the day to whoever,
All
and
right.
just sign up. And
The
so why don't we
so-called.
do that?
Oh.
That's a great idea. So we invented the idea of these signature booths and went out there and like started developing those. And as soon as we ran into legal problems with private property, we went and found, esoteric federal court cases to defend us being out there. And, it worked. Those arguments became part of police training because of us, basically.
So, so when you, I mean, did you when you started the second round, did you have any doubt that it would work, or
Well,
were you pretty much sold that it would?
we knew it was going to be a lot of work
Right.
because we knew, that's why we delayed the petition in 2015, which was an unpopular decision at the time and kind of led to the Green the Vote winter petition in 2015.
Right.
But we delayed because we didn't have any money.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
were running on nothing. We didn't have anybody. There was no businessmen helping. That was just regular everyday Oklahomans donating online. So we decided to delay, and we knew at the time that we were up against the heat. It was a hot summer,
Right.
115 degrees out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was never a guarantee we would win. And even at one point in the middle of the campaign, we did the math on our numbers, what we had, our time left, our rates, pretty complicated analysis. And we basically estimated we were going to be a few thousand signatures short.
Wow.
And it was around that time that we decided we need kind of an emergency action, basically, to ensure this happened. And that's when we went and occupied the Meridian Northwest Expressway.
Yeah. So cheap publicity stunts.
Well, it wasn't really a publicity stunt. It helped in that regard, don't get me wrong.
Right. Right.
But it was really because that spot was gathering the most signatures of all the spots in the state.
Right.
I mean, Chelsea Kennedy was out there getting hundreds of signatures, and we said, well, we need to be there 24/7 if that's the case.
Yeah.
And so we did, and we set up shop, and for 20 days until they finally put up signs around us to run us off, we were there. And I think that was obviously a big part of why this succeeded, because we gathered thousands upon thousands of signatures there.
Yeah.
And we activated, hundreds of people to go gather more. And it forced the Oklahoman to finally break the blackout, on this whole story. Because the media back then was not telling people to go sign the petition like they were this year.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were telling everybody how terrible marijuana is for you, and they were still in the Reefer Madness days.
So when you were during that I mean, was it obviously a big changeover while you were doing that? I mean, could you see the light at the end of the tunnel? Was that the turning point?
Well, I mean, when we turned in the signatures, it's not like we had time to count them.
Right.
I mean, we were gathering up till the final days, and then
And they could challenge any of them.
Yeah,
They wanted to, right?
exactly. And people are signing multiple times or signing that aren't registered to vote. It just happens, and We spent the last probably 16, 18 hours straight just stapling and making sure everything's notarized and properly, and making sure everything's good to go and ready for the Secretary of State. We put a lot of work into that part. We never had time to count. And
Yeah.
so it was kind of just like, well, let's see what happens. It looks like enough.
You had everything to gain, nothing to lose.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And, they made a fatal mistake by not verifying the signatures. It could have cost them a couple 100,000, but then they ended up spending over $1 million during the campaign
Yeah.
and throwing that money away. So I think the opposition's learned from that.
That was amazing to me that that much money was spent. I mean, there's just I mean, I think most people see the inevitability of
Yeah.
what's going on across the country, and the idea of fighting it to that degree.
I think that
I
it's a lot of
understand.
reactionaryism.
Well, I understand a few editorials, but
Right.
that was outrageous. Uh, so, uh, so once you got it in and it went through, I mean, was there a was it did it get? I mean, obviously, it got easier as you got more approval.
Yeah.
I mean, once you had enough signatures, then you got more people behind you,
Oh, yeah.
and once you got on the ballot, you got, yeah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, at every stage, people came out of the woodwork to help or lend their aid or, you name it. So it really picked up steam over and over time.
And talk a little bit about the decentralization of power, because you guys, you're not like the president or king of any of this, right?
No, and there
You're
are no real people that control, or there's no real hierarchy to this movement. From the early days, we told people this is decentralized. We don't have the money for a big corporate, hierarchy and organization and
right.
these old school political tactics.
Yeah.
So we use what's called alt organizing, where you empower people, you give them the package they need to go, make a difference in their community,
Right.
and then if they need help, they need anything, that they're free to reach out, but you're not telling them what to do on a day-to-day basis.
Right. Right.
So we kind of encouraged people to go into their communities and educate on this issue. And that's called deep canvassing, apparently. And it's actually a really good tool for changing people's minds about a single issue subject like this, a political subject. So, I mean, we didn't know what we were doing at the time, but as far as that's concerned, but it worked
Sounds
out.
like basic American politics.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you just have long, emotional conversations where you listen to people and you explain, here, let me assuage your concerns about medical marijuana. And people were having those conversations across the state. Obviously, you and me, we kind of live in a filter bubble in Tulsa where, our precincts probably voted 80 to 90% in favor.
Yeah.
So, but in other parts of the state, these conversations are still happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
And really, I mean, that's the power of the movement, as a decentralized hive mind where we're not controlled by anybody, and any leaders that kind of reject the ideals of the movement or the principles are thrown out pretty quick.
Yeah. 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 Well, on top of that, you don't have to worry about someone being disgraced and toppling the whole thing like every other movement.
Oh, yeah. If somebody gets disgraced, they just kind of disappear.
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah, that was Harry.
Because yeah, it happens.
So, when this was happening, talk a bit about once you knew that you had won, then that whole process where I guess there was some corruption and they were going to basically, what was it? They weren't going to allow anything to happen. Was that it?
Yeah,
There.
well, the initial rules that came out of the Department of Health were kind of vaguely based on this interagency memo, and it was
Well, actually,
not good.
before you talk about that, the law itself was fairly spelled out, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was clear enough in the regards that were important.
Right, right.
So it was a patient's rights bill more than anything. And in that regard, it's very clear on what rights patients have as far as their privacy, what they can consume, what they can use. And the problem is there's a few holes that we didn't think about, like THC limits. That was
Yeah.
never a discussion in 2016 because it's not something anybody wanted in the community, for one. And, we didn't really think of the overreach that could occur in some of those regards. And you got to keep in mind, we also knew that we didn't have the money to even print sheets of paper to turn in the signatures. So as we
Right.
wrote this, we kept it lean just to make
Keep
sure
it.
we could succeed in the first place. So all those problems are pretty much solved at this point, I would say. The new rules that came out are pretty solid. They satisfy the industry, they satisfy patients, and that's why we're rolling out right now.
So uh, we're here. This is Sunday. Yesterday was the first day. They had over 500 people apply.
Yeah.
It's all online, and in order to apply, it's like $100, non-refundable. They keep saying. Why would I want a refund if I send it in? I'm not quite sure I understand that. And then you have to get a doctor to sign it, so you have to pay a doctor. And we're talking about anywhere to 100 to 300. Like this, you'd have the most expensive doctor you want.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes to get a doctor to. So is he writing a prescription or is he
He's signing a recommendation.
okay?
So, the biggest problem is a lot of people's primary care physicians are under either, a hospital administration that's against it or some insurance policy that prevents them from recommending. But there's a lot of MDs and DOs that across the state are already coming out that are accepting to cannabis patients. And
Like I said, I'm
yeah,
with, I go to IHS, so I'm sure they're not going to give me a
yeah, and
recommendation.
they're, the
They're under federal
tribes are under
guidelines.
federal guidelines, and that's actually a big pain point because a lot of Oklahoma's tribal land, and that's still under federal guidelines.
Oh, we're very aware of that.
Yeah. So these are
I've studied up on that a little in my day.
yeah. I mean, these are issues that are gonna just take time to get sorted. Obviously, federal law's got to change at some point, but if there's going to be a bellwether for the change in federal law, Oklahoma should be it.
Yeah.
And us successfully rolling out this program, beating Arkansas after they've been basically waiting for 2 years, it's a big win for Oklahoma. Oklahoma State Department of Health built the website, the portal's working. They probably made $2 million in revenue right now just from the commercial applications.
I think on Morning Joe or one of those the next morning they thought, yeah, Oklahoma going green was like the end of it all. This is, don't even bother anymore.
Right.
And and I always talk about there were all the people who, even people that were pro marijuana who were seemed to be anti. They would always say that it'll never pass in Oklahoma or Oklahoma's too conservative. And then, as I was saying before we started this, that there were people that even after it was passed still insisted it wasn't going to happen for 2 or 3 years. And then once the crazy regulations came out, then it was, oh, it's going to be longer and longer. And yeah, the fact that it just all happened at once just amazed me, because I remember you saying something about if the law worked right, it would be legal before the next election, and you were correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's legal, but so if I apply for tonight for a card, what does that entitle me tomorrow as a citizen? What am I getting out of that I don't have today?
Well, you obviously have to wait for your license to come in the mail.
Right.
Because you have to be holding on your license,
Okay,
basically.
so once I get my license,
right.
then what have I got going for me that I didn't have going for me the day before?
Well, right now, it's kind of a gray area where to get products, where to get seeds, and
Well, we haven't
all
had time to
that's
grow
going-
any, right?
Well, yeah, and you still have to wait. There's a set period of time. I believe it's 7 days for a seedling and 60 days for mature plants. So you can't just show up with a license and have a 6
Party.
mature plants
Yeah.
the next day. And obviously, there's probably people already growing out there, to be honest. But
Right.
because they were growing before 788. But
They were growing before you were born. Yeah.
exactly. So ultimately, it's not going to take long before seeds are available for patients, and little shops start opening either on the internet that can ship in state or have couriers, and there's
So
going to be
can-
seed banks really soon. We'll just put it that way.
So seeds can move through states, but marijuana
No,
cannot.
that's still
Is that-
illegal federally. And,
It is?
Yeah,
Okay.
and technically it's a violation of federal law. Even people that imported seeds before 788 really don't get, it's a slap on the wrist unless
Right.
you're importing pounds.
Not that we're advocating this.
Right, of course, we don't advocate
Right.
anything. That's just what I've seen,
Yeah, yeah.
in experience. And every other state's had this issue where it's just a federally illegal to import seeds, and that's that catch-22 that everyone just kind of looks the other way.
But
So,
technically, it's federally illegal to sell
right,
marijuana.
right, exactly. Everything we're doing here is federally legal currently. And you got to keep that in mind.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, there's going to be a solution at some point, possibly. There may be a special session in September or before the regular session or before the election. And there may be legislation that comes out that solves these problems. But if not, it's a gray area. It's up to the police to prosecute. And if the police are being reasonable, and I believe that they're changing their tune. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we're good to go as far as I'm concerned. It's
Yeah.
just a matter of time. But obviously, there's no way to buy marijuana right now if
Right.
you have your card, and dispensaries probably won't be open until November or
And
December.
by now, if anyone's watching this in 2035, it's 2000 August 25th, 2018. So we're looking at probably 3 months before anything even hits the market.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
But commercial cards will hopefully be processed and go out soon, and then dispensaries can legally operate once they have product in hand. There was over 300 grower applications last I saw, which is, we're gonna definitely have a good supply, which is exactly what patients need.
Yeah, but there's going to be a few shortages right at first.
Well, probably, but the difference between a system like this versus Pennsylvania, where there was serious shortages on day one,
Yeah.
is we're rolling out in a more fluid manner. They only had a handful of grow licenses, a handful of dispensaries, and they didn't plan for the demand pretty much. It's Oklahoma. There's going to be a lot of people that want to grow and get into this market, so there's going to be a demand to satisfy the supply. I feel like it's just a matter of how that shakes out in the long term.
Yeah.
So.
I'm sure there are a lot of people that already have systems set up
Oh yeah,
going.
they have everything
But,
ready to go.
yeah.
There's home growers ready to go.
Yeah.
There's commercial growers ready to go.
Yeah, yeah.
They're just waiting to have their license in hand so they can start legally planting.
So, culturally, we were talking about this the other day. Uh, I just see this as a major shift. There's something about the just just the cultural difference, like having a pot bar instead of an alcohol bar,
Mm-hmm.
and that sort of thing. That's going to be that will make a difference. And my people my age, I'm getting ready to turn 57. I'm sending them videos to explain dab, or the proper way to use certain
Yeah.
a glass bong and that sort of thing.
Right.
And I feel like there's this major education movement to get people up to speed, because in many cases you've got people who have not used pot in 30 years,
Mm-hmm.
who now that they're old and are getting arthritis or whatever, are looking in that direction.
Yeah, and that's in every other state that has a medical marijuana program, that's what we see. Is
Yeah.
basically an uptick of use in the baby boomer and up generations because they don't have access. Everybody below that age group, generally that wants it,
Yeah.
has access through the black market. It's just the way it is, and as a result, they're the ones that are getting into this program, and they also have a lot of legitimate medical reasons. They're facing
Yeah.
cancer, arthritis, inflammation, and bladder and other metabolism issues, and you name it.
Well, I'm on like 4 or 5 ibuprofens a day just to walk, so
Right,
I'm looking
and
forward to it.
that's
Yeah.
not good for your liver.
Yeah.
And where cannabis is completely safe for
Yeah, yeah.
and it's not going to affect you negatively in that regard with like NSAIDs and other things might.
Yeah. So after this, what's going on with there's the recreational that's also going on. I know you're not involved in that.
Well, I mean, when that happened, we were still running the campaign
Right,
and
right.
pretty busy in that regard. I think the recreational is a little bit premature, perhaps in Oklahoma. One of the biggest reasons we put so much effort and steam behind this back in 2014 even, was that polls showed 60% of Oklahomans supported medical marijuana.
Right.
I mean, that percentage probably hasn't shifted too much over the years. We've definitely like entrenched our own base here in Oklahoma, but you know, there's still the ongoing march. I now know of people that are being educated, but I mean, the polls for recreational, they don't show the same data. There's like 40 something
Yeah, yeah.
percent support. So, you know, people, it's never happened before that recreational happened like overnight. I think it's like 13 something years on average for it to transition from medical to recreational. Probably not going to take that long for us, but you know, it's one of those things where it's important we get people access to the medicine they need, and then we make sure that the medical systems don't collapse when we do have recreation.
Right, right,
Because
right.
in Oregon right now, everybody talks about oversaturation as a problem for the industry, but it's really more a problem for medical patients than you know, people trying to make a buck,
Yeah,
because the medical patients are the ones who can't find their high CBD products anymore because it's not popular. No one wants to get, you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
smoke a bunch of high CBD marijuana if
Right.
they're trying to just get high recreationally.
That makes
So,
sense.
you know, I mean, there's issues we got to face moving forward as we liberalize. But right now, the key is defending 788 as we wrote it,
Right.
making sure the OSMA, the DAs, and these other just agencies or organizations stuck in the 1930s, like keeping them
Mm.
at bay.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and so in economic terms, uh, I mean, there's a boom in other places. Wherever this happens, can we expect to see that here?
yeah,
And and I
yeah.
mean, and economically, you're putting a lot of people to work. You know, and does anyone have any idea of what we're looking at in terms of numbers?
I mean, that's hard to estimate because 788's a unique program. It eliminates the kind of archaic idea of a state legislature deciding
Yeah.
medical qualifying conditions. So, you know, we're beyond that now. And as a result, it's opened up to conditions that other programs would have not been available for. So we're going to have a higher demand here, probably at the higher end of the medical marijuana states, which is like 3.5%. So that's approximately 140,000 or so Oklahomans, and you know that's a pretty good pool of demand for an
Yeah.
industry, and you know that's going to bring in millions of dollars in tax revenue. It's already brought in millions in commercial fees for applications.
Yeah.
So the program will more than pay for itself. It'll generate a big, you know, new industry of entrepreneurs, people that are, you know, young or kind of outside the usual range of entrepreneurs. I hope it brings in a lot of people that are on the black market too.
Yeah.
Because really, you know, what's a better way to go clean? Start providing medicine to patients instead of selling marijuana on the black market. And we need to make, instead of trying to keep those people out and keep them pushed out of the system, you know, we need to
Hmm.
find a way for them to come back into the, you know, the law-abiding world with everyone else. And I think that's a big part of 788 too.
Well, and also the economic issue of the idea of things coming the marijuana prices coming down.
Yeah.
That's something that will take time to happen.
Oh, it's not going to happen in Oklahoma anytime soon
Right. Right.
because there's going to be a big influx in the market of people who maybe overproduce or whatever. But what you got to realize is that they're just going to lose money, you
Yeah.
know, and there's no federal tax protections for when you lose money. And while other, you know, industries you can just write off on your taxes all your losses, you're just
Yeah.
eating that here without 280E.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, that's a big actual buffer against people trying to roll in and overproduce. I think we'll see a lot of small, mid-sized growers producing a diversity of products, and over time it'll kind of, there'll, you know, big players will emerge that did things better or scaled up, you know, better, or you know, it'll just take time for that to happen. It's not a overnight thing.
Right.
I mean, in other states, like I said, like Washington, Colorado, they had medical programs for years, you know, a decade or two in some cases, before we ever saw any oversaturation problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
People have been growing legally for, you know, since the 90s in Washington.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but that is kind of the American way, that we're always
Yeah,
oversaturating and dropping prices.
I, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Like, what's wrong with dropping the marginal cost of goods down, especially when it's a medical good?
Well, that's the thing about it. The price can be prohibitive too, just as any medicine.
Yeah,
That's why the idea of bringing the price down, I think, is something that's you know should be a fairly important thing. And luckily, within a free market, that's what happens. We're not exactly in a free market here, but
right.
uh, uh, you know, I know we're not going to see 1970 prices, 75 prices anytime soon. But uh, when I look at anything else, you know, what is this pink salt that they're selling? A friend of mine had some, and I said, "Oh, isn't this expensive?" She said, "No, I get this at Aldi's,"
Yeah,
and so I figure eventually we'll have Aldi's like Dab and stuff, and you'll have discount stores and
uh huh.
you'll have generic brands and that kind of thing, just
Yeah,
like you had generic cigarettes or you had
right.
generic beer.
Well, yeah, everybody's kind of fearing that apocalypse of the big corporate. I know like Heineken and Corona and a few other beer companies are trying to get into basically cannabis infused sparkling water.
Yeah,
And I don't fear that. I Starbucks exists, but I still go to my local coffee shop
yeah.
because I like it better. I know the people, the coffee's better. And craft brewers or craft growers. In other domains, they still exist despite the fact we have Budweiser, right?
Yeah, yeah.
People are still opening up, pub brewery
Yeah,
complexes
yeah.
here in Oklahoma and Tulsa all the time.
People are
Like,
still buying $7 pink salt.
yeah,
You
exactly. Like
know?
that market doesn't dry up, and I think in Oklahoma here, a lot of people are kind of pushing back against WalMarts. It's
Yeah.
not the big popular name it used to be years ago. Like people don't want to shop there as much anymore. I just have that feeling.
I quit completely.
Yeah,
I realized there are other stores I didn't have to prove that I just bought groceries from them when I left,
right.
and I kind of enjoyed that feeling that they trusted me.
The only
Uh,
thing they're good for anymore at this point is like when you need some sort of office supplies for some revolutionary activity at
yeah,
2 a.m.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
it.
Or cookies, something like that at
Well,
2 a.m.
other supplies, right?
Yeah, whatever you need at 2 a.m.
Well, I got a quick trip for my cookies at 2
Okay,
a.m.
that's a good one. Also, what about uh, so what does happen with driving and DUI and all that kind of thing on marijuana? Do they have any plan, or has anyone come up with anything that worked or would even hold up in court?
Well, luckily, our allies in law enforcement are trying to retrain the police in the state right now to teach them the Colorado model, which is basically use your standard field sobriety testing that you use otherwise,
Right,
as well as a kind of a plus one. Is there burnt marijuana smell? Is there an
right,
open marijuana container? Because usually, I mean, this is marijuana we're talking
yeah,
about. If you're stupid enough to drive impaired on marijuana as a medical user on a consistent dosage,
yeah,
then you probably are irresponsible enough to have an open container or just
yeah,
be have a joint hanging out of your mouth, right?
yeah, yeah,
And in that case, it's obvious for a police officer to say, okay, you're just blatantly violating the
right.
law. Um,
But there's no
but
balloon
the,
test
the,
for
the,
marijuana.
the fear is the blood tests and the DUI, the existing, DUI laws.
Right,
And while I don't think, TPD probably not going to be enforcing that unless it's a severe, DWI crash or something.
right.
But I know OHP's out there kind of salivating over medical marijuana licenses right now. And that's why it was so important to kind of keep people's privacy maintained in that database we
Yeah,
gave
yeah.
the Department of Health. If it's anything that privately or personally identifies you needs to be sealed.
Right.
And that's kind of that. Hopefully, that'll be a backstop until the legislature can come in and fix these problems, or until there's a court case where they try to arrest somebody for impairment. Well, let's appeal that. Take it to court.
Yeah.
Was I impaired? Do blood THC metabolite tests? Do those actually correlate to impairment? Show the data to a judge. It doesn't. The judge can throw that law out or make a precedent to where at that point it's
Yeah.
it's it's easier to fight. So these are the kind of issues we're going to have to work through.
Yeah.
But I know we got allies in the police, we got allies in the legislature that want to see this thing work right, and it's just a matter of supporting them and voting out all the rest of the others, basically. Firing all of them.
Which might happen here, according to some polls, in a few months. So, well, that's what happens when you film in a house full of dogs. So what's the next step for you, and what are you doing next?
Well, actually, I've been coding a lot recently. We're developing a website that has, doctor locator, as well as just kind of our Oklahoma Cannabis League website that we can use to build out made in Oklahoma specific tools for patients and provide them with all the info they need going forward. And we're also working on sponsored programs to provide free cards to disabled veterans and free recommendations and that's all kind of in the works right now. Because there's a lot of people that, on fixed incomes that still can't afford this, and we want to make sure that they can get into the system. We can find dispensaries that will offer them discounts and tell everybody, hey, go support this dispensary because they're helping out the community.
Yeah.
And create this feedback loop where, people start shopping at the right places that are giving back. And this could really be a good industry for Oklahoma. We just got to keep a watchdog on the out-of-state interests trying to roll in.
Yeah.
And then, support our local friends that are trying to create medicine for the community.
And hope it's not taken over by big pharma immediately.
Well, yeah, and that's OSMA's model. They're trying to come in and kind of big pharma-ize everything, and eliminate competition, create monopolies, basically, have very stringent, requirements to where the medical marijuana is almost useless to you, basically.
And you end up with more chemicals in it than you do a cigarette.
Right, and the reason, well, it's less that and more because they just want to suppress people's entrance into the program. Every state that has medical marijuana, pharmaceutical drug use drops.
Yeah.
I mean, for anxiety, for depression, for pain, a lot of pharmaceutical drugs that these companies are making, bank on, people just stop taking them. They don't need them anymore. Or they lower their oxycodone prescriptions because they're only using it for breakthrough pain now. They're not using it as an everyday pain tool. So, that's what they fear. Profit margins going down.
Well, I always point out I had a friend, and she was like a 4-joint-a-day person.
Mm-hmm.
This was back years ago. And she was absolutely functional. She had, mental problems.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen her for like 17 years or so. And she's been on Oxycontin all that time, and it's not the same person.
Yeah.
And it's really, really sad, and it's anecdotal, but that's the example I always saw. And then working with Oklahomans for Health, I got to interview all the people that had children that had seizures, or I forget the gentleman that had cancer that I talked to, who was kind of a conservative businessman before all this started.
Oh, Ray Jennings.
Ray, yeah. And Ace, or whatever he called himself these days, Craig, and who had his spine fused together.
Oh yeah.
And that's just people keep saying that this was just a way to get legal, recreational pass, but when you really meet these people and you really see and hear these stories, you realize, there was a reason to get medical marijuana pass before recreational.
Right.
And like I said, I'm looking forward to seeing how this turns around. My friend Liddy, she has a dog who is dying from bone cancer, and she got CBD oil, and the dog just turned around. She's walking happy, eating again, and Liddy's used it for her carpal tunnel syndrome, and it's worked for her. And this is somebody that never, even thought about marijuana as medicine or even as recreational. So I'm totally sold. Anyway.
Well, like neuropathic pain that's one of the big ones.
Yeah.
Actually, it's more effective than the gabinoids or the opioids. And like my dad, he's on the gabinoids right now. He finally got off the opioids, but it's just as bad. It's not as addictive, or it's you're not going to overdose as easily on them, but
Yeah.
they're blocking his synaptic growth. Like, and literally, if you have a traumatic brain injury, the last thing you want is something that blocks your synaptic
Yeah, yeah,
growth.
yeah.
So, marijuana is completely the opposite. Like, CBD and THC together is a neurogenerative. It's neuroprotective. It's not
Right.
going to block any growth. It's going to promote, healthy growth and reformation of those networks. And, I'm trying to get him off the gabinoids eventually, but we're not going to be able to do that without some serious like concentrates, because I mean he has significant pain,
Yeah.
and I'm supposed to buy like crappy butane dabs off the black market, like, and
Yeah.
give it to my dad. So I think that for a lot of people around the state are about to have serious relief, and they're going to have a good alternative.
Well, and that's the other thing that for pain, that whatever pot you are able to get from the guy down the street, that's not necessarily going to help
Oh yeah.
whatever pain you have.
Yeah.
That we are talking about strains that are specifically designed.
And I think that our system for testing will ultimately, once the legislature includes that kind of testing and laboratory language into the system, we'll be able to have on our medical marijuana packages the THC content, your CBD content, all the other active cannabinoids. You'll be able to see probably even terpenes, which is kind of a new thing that isn't available in other states. So like Oklahoma is probably going to have one of the most cutting edge kind of systems for being able to say, oh, that's actually the stuff that works for me is this terpene here, and I never even knew that. And then, because you'll never find that out with a black market product. And then
Right.
you'll be able to, expand or just kind of focus on your products around that terpene, and you can actually find what works best for you. So
Yeah.
it's going to be pretty interesting. People can experiment and find what works for them.
Well, pretty good for the buckle of the Bible Belt, where it was never supposed to happen.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of improbable events that occurred in 2016, so and beyond.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for talking with us,
Yeah.
and we'll check in whenever things get hairy again.
Hey, yeah, I'd be love to have come back on at any time, Wilhelm. Yeah.
All right. We'll talk to you soon. Wave at the people. Say goodbye.
Bye bye.
Adios. Let's see if we can know how to turn this off.